We are live.
Hello, everybody. I am Heidi Hörnlein or Adelheid Hörnlein, and I'm here with Margherita Crystal Lotus, my buddy in doing these weekly hangouts on air. Today's topic will be, what is the ego and how do we manage it? This is, I know, a very big theme, and we won't be able to come to a real conclusion as how do you say, completeness of discussion to this topic, but we want to try to begin. So, Margherita, hello to you.
Hello and welcome.
Hello.
This is so great to be here.
And the question, what is the ego? Let's first try to define it a little bit. And what do you understand under the concept of ego?
Okay, so ego, for me, apart from psychological theories, for me it is a concept, an idea of a part of me. And I think that a person like myself have many parts. We have a physical part, we have an emotional part, we have a mental part, we have a spiritual part. And somewhere in there, there is something that identifies this being of several bodies, like I mentioned. It's identifying that as a person. And that part is ego in my book. And so I sometimes call the ego the lower self, not to say it's less valuable, but just to have a distinction from the higher self, which I think is that part of us that is truly connected with the divine, the source where we came from. And sort of that's our spiritual part that is not conditioned about how we grew up or what kind of trauma we had or whatever. So it's helpful to have this distinction, because when we work with healing and overcoming our problems in our life, we can say, yeah, that's my ego. So does that help us defining the topic area?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is ego for you is the part of yourself which has made the human experience and the conditioning which we undergo by experience from childhood on, and that the non-ego part of you would be more the connection with the divine. Is it right?
Yes. And when I work with somebody in a healing session or in a therapeutic session, it's easier to understand the process that they actually have a perfected self inside. They haven't reached there yet, that higher self, so that they know that, okay, I'm not inferior than other people, even though I have many problems. I just haven't connected to that part yet. And that's very helpful in a therapeutic situation, to know that, yeah, which way am I now going? So the problem is not that I don't have it, it's just how I connect with it within me. And that is reassuring for people who want to heal their problem.
Okay, so I understand that when you are in therapeutic situation, you make clear to the people that there is, let's say, a perfect self in them, a self which is really connected and is wise, is connected with the universe, and it is sort of a optimum version of themselves. And you explain them that in the very moment when they have to struggle with so many problems, then they have not reached this perfect self yet, but that it's there to guide them in some way. Is it true?
Yeah. So when, like, from my own experience, I mean, I get distracted sometimes. I'm no different than anybody else. But when I'm in those moments that I have this flow inside of myself, I can feel I have a connection. My inner channels, my chakras, let's say, they are flowing, and I receive information like this. Boom, it's just there. I know what to do. There is no doubt. There is no confusion. There is like just the presence. And I have to say, I have to really focus and relax to actually be in that state. And I'm not in that state all the time, I have to say. But the longer we can stay in that connection with our higher self is better, because in those moments we are totally happy. We are actually feeling that we're connected with everything. And we can have our lower self part as sort of our office manager to handle our physical body in the third dimensional reality. And so if that is helpful, if you have the ego as your office manager or your life manager, whatever, then it's easier to understand what ego's role is. Because, you know, the ego is just the confirmation or the set of beliefs that in the past have worked. And so it's like driving in the car and looking at the rear view mirror and see what the history back there was, and then we're making decisions depending on that. Okay, if I drive off the road, I'm going to be really hurt. That's a great thing. And that the ego is the one who is saying, oh no, hit the brakes, you need to do something here, and then we're reacting in that way. But where it gets a little iffy is when our perceptions is clouded, right? And then we have beliefs that not in an immediate situation of danger, like driving off the road, we are misled by if we let ego actually run the company. And the office manager usually do not run a business or a company. It's the owner or the CEO, right? So the higher self, you could say, is sort of a CEO of a corporation, and then delegates to the office manager or any other manager to run the company. But if you have a bunch of office managers, because it could be many of them, we don't really progress very well. So we have to
let me try to understand that a little bit. What I was hearing, that when you are in your higher self, you have a sort of immediate knowing, an immediate understanding, and you know, what I understand there is the intuition is possible. While when you are in your ego, it is mainly formed by experience and your conclusions about what your experience has meant, and if it's good or it's not good, and if you can use it or if you can not use it in certain situations. By the way, you gave the example of the car in danger, in an accident. I think there are real moments, I have experienced these, where it was almost accidents, where instead of the ego, the higher self came in, and there was no thinking, and I knew in sort of intuition what the right thing is to do to avoid the accident. So I think sometimes in life these are coming together. Your experience is nurturing then the intuition, which is without thought. It's just immediate knowing what to do, for instance. What would you say about that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I also have experienced something like that when I stayed open. I think that the ego part of us is a sort of a solution that actually does something instead of doing nothing. And if we are connected to our higher self, our divine part, then we don't get into these situations because we already have been alerted about it. And I think maybe intuition is maybe what you can call the higher self, part of higher self as well. So, you know, like you're driving along and then you say, slow down. Example, I was driving back home in Sweden on a remote road. It was a highway. There was no cars there. There was sort of a dusk and lots of fir trees and trees. And I was happily going along, and then I already, all of a sudden, I felt, okay, slow down here, slow down, slow down. Okay, so I slowed down. And the next moment, there was this humongous moose, like elk-like animal, just stepped out right in front of my car. And I was able to not hit it. And, you know, it wouldn't be very good to be stranded with a big animal like that, because they're quite big where no cars are. So that, I think, is an intervention by the guidance.
You can name it, because in this way there is also the possibility, like Rupert Sheldrake talks about the morphogenetic fields, that you were together with this animal in the same field and you knew you have this special sensibility, and you, I mean, which everybody has, somebody has it more, somebody has it less, and you could perceive that this animal was in your way. You know, I just say it. I'm not sure if this is the same thing, what you call the higher self. Anyway, we were talking about the ego. Let's go back to the ego. In our culture of today, ego is like a boogeyman, no? It's something bad often, and we try to get rid of it because we don't have to be egocentric. This is the spiritual teaching. From our childhood, we have learned not to be selfish, to take care for the others, especially women, and so we try to avoid to really develop a healthy ego. So we have learned that ego makes a lot of damage, and it does, as you see when people are very aggressive, very egocentric men fighting wars for egocentric reasons, you know. Women do things too, but anyway. And this is very, how to say, it's not good for surviving. It's not good for thriving when, you know, with every misunderstanding, somebody takes out the knife and kills the other person. So we couldn't go on. So it is a good thing to tame the ego in a certain way. And I'm wondering, when you talk about how do we handle the ego, do you talk about these things?
Yes, I love what you said about that. That makes a lot of sense. The morphogenic fields, yes, that's part of the guidance, to be aware of these things, because just to take a moment to address that, I think that if you see mushrooms on the floor under the tree, they come from the same roots, the same myceliums, and I see that our bodies are upcroppings of the same field. So we are, if you think about, if we come from the one, let's say, we can come up in different bodies, and if we think that we're different, we really aren't. We're just different expressions of the sort of greater or the divine self. Now, when we come down to the individual level in a relationship or between nations, there has been all kinds of violence created because the people who were in charge and could decide for other people, they made a choice to center up on the lower self, the ego, and say, we are the one who are right.
And don't talk only in the past tense, it is also in the present tense.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's say if another definition of ego is, if you think you're right, that's your ego speaking.
And only me is right. This is the ego, because you are probably right. But if you claim that you are the only one who is right and all the others out there are wrong, then it's for sure the ego.
Yeah, and you see, like all the wars, all the problems is facilitated us. All the challenges in a person's life actually challenge us, right? So in the greater scheme of things, maybe this is part of the divine design that, okay, we have to experience all of these problems of having been in wars, having done all of these aggressive acts, and then we have to, let's say, attune for them and clean up the mess. And that takes maybe, if you look at some certain spiritual traditions, many, many lifetimes to clean up. You go to hell, let's say, or some people go to a heaven. But in the day-to-day life for a person who has some problems in the relationship, or that they don't know how to speak up with another person, know that if you think that you are right but you're not speaking up about it, that's the ego the same way, you know. And if you try to see yourself, okay, what is actually going on here? What I'm talking about is how we can become aware of all our parts. And as you talked about in the beginning, like, okay, so your ego is your manager of the three-dimensional reality, right? So listen to the ego from the point of view of your higher self. You could try it, you know, you could fake it until you make it. But when you become aware that you actually are beginning a small war by doing the statement, well, you're wrong about that. If you say that to somebody, then that could be the start of a war. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's probably correct. What would you say?
Yeah, to see only things from one's own perspective, this is always a problem. When we are not able to see the things from the other person's perspective, when we are not able to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person. So we will be very firm and convinced that our side vision of the things is right and what we say is right. And the other person, and we are right, because what we see for that, we see that and we say that's so and that's it. The other person sees the world in a different way and is right in, I think we talked last time about this, you know, is right also. And when we insist, I'm right and you are wrong, and the other says, no, I'm right, you are wrong, and this is the perfect war going on. And this is not resolvable because they have a truth, but they have a partial truth. And as long as the person is not willing to acknowledge that her or his truth is true, but partial, as Ken Wilber says so nicely, we won't get an understanding. We will never come to peace between each other. So
that's very important to know, because like you can't heal by trying to say that you're right. You can't come to some really spiritual realizations by going around and thinking that you're right and I'm going to convert the other people. The realizations and the spiritual development and the healing of the personas and archetypes comes when you widen the blinders and open them up. And then you can see that this person, they have this problem, and I could have compassion with that, and I would try to help them. And you know, I'm not going to try to help them by saying that my way is right. I'm going to put myself in their shoes and say, have you tried this? Mm-hmm. And then they can come to the realization themselves that, yeah, there is another third way. And this is what I usually do with my client, is to say, because they have a number of options that they think is possible. And then I say, there is always a third option. You know, there's never a black and white. There is a third option, and that is to look outside of the box. And when you look outside of the box, you will notice that, yeah, that ego part of me, that came from a pattern because I was treated so and so, and this happened, and I formed the belief about that. And when I could see how that belief uh, constricts my life now, then we need to say to the ego, look here, we need to change this routine here. Instead of going this way, we're going to do it this way. And then when you do that from your higher self part, the ego understands that, yeah, I can do it that way because this is even better. And so we don't have to lose face all the time. So ego do not like to lose face. And so
this is very, very, very interesting what you say, because with your words, you're describing what I would call the ego development. The ego in its very primitive form sees only oneself, you know, and is only trying to survive. And in its higher forms, it's every more opening the perspectives, adding new perspectives to it. So when you are able to really see the world of the other people's perspective, which is not easy. Children have to learn it, and some of them never get it. And people even don't, you know, when you see outside how much violence is there still, this is a cause of not being able to really feel what other people feel, you know, otherwise you couldn't do it to them. But I wanted to say, when you are able to do that, you have opened the perspectives. Your ego has grown up, you know, and the more perspectives you can develop, the higher developed is your ego, you know. And this is a slightly different concept, I think, of ego, but more or less it is that. So instead of what many spiritual teachings say, we want to get rid of our ego, what we really want to do is develop our ego in ever higher forms, so it is less insistent, and what you say, it needs less to be right and run the show only in this way and no other way.
Yeah, because when you're upgrading your own ego to a smarter ego, then you can see there are some benefits of that. So that's
exactly.
Thing, isn't it?
Tell me more about that.
Yes, you know, are you equipped with your smartphone right now, or you have one of those old things that, you know, operate, they don't have a camera and they don't have, you know, internet on your phone. Now we have smartphones. So can we introduce the concept of smart egos?
Good.
And the smart ego really knows and trusts that the CEO of the company, that's your higher self, right? That they know what they're doing. The smart ego knows that when you're connected with your higher self, he knows or she knows that he's not going to be fired, because we still need the ego. He just needs to be smarter. And then when he or she knows that, then he can work on that, right? I say he for some reason. Maybe it's my subconscious. Anyway, so what do you think about the smart ego?
Smart is a nice word, but it doesn't really give the direction to what smart really is. You know, it can be, you know, an egocentric person can be very smart and cheat everybody. So smart is a little bit, it can be more, you know, like, we get it out. I think what you mean is a more responsible ego, maybe. An ego which is taking in account the result of what it is doing, and an ego which is able to connect with the higher, what you call higher self, which is able to be influenced by this connection with what you want to call it, with the cosmos, with God, with whatever, you know, with the intuition, whatever we want to call it. it is not closed anymore. The lower parts of ego, the lower stage of development of ego, they would completely exclude that there is something who could give them a guidance, you know, and who could influence them. And the higher stages of ego, they would collaborate with the higher forces. That would be my definition of smart ego.
Yeah, I mean, it's concepts, all of it, right?
Yes,
But
sure.
when we can make something be understood in a better way, I think that an ego in itself is not a leader. The ego is, when the ego has developed into its highest part, it knows that it has to listen to the higher self, and also allow the higher self, when the person opens up to that channel stays open. It's not closed. Now, it might not be fully open, it could be a little opening, but that opening is something that each person have to do, to say, oh, there is something higher here, there's something more, there is something that I really don't know anything about. Now I'm going to work on allowing that. I'm going to work on listening to that, and maybe that voice begins as an intuition of something like that when I drove on the road and I got, oh, I have to slow down. That didn't come from ego. That came from my guidance, or the morphogenetic fields that the higher guidance perceived or knew about.
Yeah. You know, I once heard somebody say that the ego represents the knowledge which you have gathered during your life, and the higher self represents the wisdom, which is a sort of combination of your interpretation of your experience together with the higher, you know, the connection with the intuition of things you would never have thought about, only learning. I was thinking about, I heard many of the great scientists of the 20th century said they never would have found their groundbreaking discoveries by thinking. They found it because it came to them from somewhere, and I'm talking about this somewhere. This is bigger than the present set of being and the present set of tools.
For sure, for sure. And I want to point something out here. If you have a thought, it's the ego that is thinking. Because the higher self don't operate in sort of the mental realm. It is above the mental realm of thoughts and words. And inspiration, let's say, can take the form. We interpret it as words and messages, but it is really not from that level. So that's why when I work with clients, I divide it up like an emotional body and a mental body, a physical body, and a spiritual body, right? And to make it easier. And the intuition, the guidance, the higher self does not, it's not a concept. It's not existing on the mental realm, let's say. It's from another place that really you can't describe it very well. And so in order to communicate with other people on the planet here and using words, we have to use our egos to actually express our own individual expression. Like I'm here on the Hangout, and I have my tagline underneath of me. It's the lower third. Maybe that's some kind of, you know, a lower denomination of, let's say, Margherita. Because on a higher realm, maybe that name even doesn't relate to anything, because maybe I'm connected with all there is on another realm, But here in the 3D dimension, I need to have a name, I need to have a body, I have to maintain an individuality on some level. I could be open to other people, or I could go around and make war with other people. It's the choices that the ego makes.
Yeah, and you are talking about when you work with your clients, what help do you give them to handle their ego? First of all, what is the problem they have with their ego? And then how do you help them?
Yeah. So most of the people who come to me, they have some kind of emotional problem. They had gone through a divorce, or they have a problem of some kind, and they can't figure it out, and that it's like blocks in their mind. They cannot move forward. Everything is difficult in their life, so maybe emotional overwhelm. And so I had another client here just recently, and she wanted to get into to solve a problem. She knew that she had a problem. She wanted to solve it because she couldn't move forward to on her journey here, the spiritual journey she had, but she had to go and regain some parts of herself that she wasn't connected with. So what we did a past life regression, and in that regression we went to an earlier part of her where she had lost that connection to her physical body in that particular area. And you know, in the relationship with another person, especially intimate relations, there can be disconnected parts, especially in intimate situations, and that's what happened with this person. And so we found out that peace, and we brought it into the present, and we worked with the physical body. She had to do movements and a coordination physically to see if she could actually connect those parts of her body so that she had a little more control over those. And I said, you know, it's very important that she connect with that. And then when she had this insight that, oh, I really did not know that that part of me was not functioning that well. And it you know, when you think about it, if you have a hand, and then your reach of your hand can only go this far, but the potential is to have the hand even go all the way back here, and all the parts of our body have this potential, but if we only can go to here, you know, like if you move the hand like this, then we have denied ourselves that movement all the way around, and that could be all of our parts. So in that particular case, we managed to, she managed to actually connect with that part of herself that had that block, and she removed it. I was with her, and we removed it. So that was really powerful to actually be able to do that. And she came and asked about it, and she didn't know really where it was, and then she found it, and she had a way actually of working with it. Does that answer the question?
This answers the question, yeah, and it's wonderful that we can sort of, I don't know how to call it, re-educate or relieve or expand these parts of us which are limited, which are kept in a constricted position, let's say, and that we have the possibility to liberate them and to come into the full flourishing. And I think, as you said, the main thing about our development is to integrate as many voices or parts, or however you want to call it, in a good way into our being, in our multi-level being, as you expressed it. Yeah, and I really would like, Margherita, that next time we talk a little bit more about that, about how to handle all these inner parts. We were talking about our inner parts as if this was normal. But, you know, there might be people who have no idea what inner parts are. They say, I'm myself, I'm that here, and that's it. Maybe we could go into it a little bit more in detail and then see how we can handle these different inner parts. Today we were talking about ego. In my idea, the ego is even a whole bunch of inner voices, of inner parts, and not just one big thing, you know. And I really would appreciate if we talked a little bit more about that. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the purpose of actually talking about is so that a person who is listening to us here have insights that can help them to actually solve a problem that they have in their life. It's not a philosophical discussion, but it's geared to actually help somebody say, oh, that happened to me. Oh, there is a way I can do something about it. So that's at least my purpose of actually talking about ego in the first place. Okay? Mm-hmm. So yeah, for sure, I would love to talk more about this, maybe several times, because, you know, when we talk about a big area like ego, we have to sort of define the area and be precise. And as you said, there are those of you out there that have not really delved into this particular part, and then that might be really, really helpful for you to know a little bit more about how the inner mechanism of our psyche, of our intuition, and our ego, and all of the other parts that we have, how they actually work together to drive us through from when we are born until the end of our life. And if we at the end of our life can say, I really worked on myself, I gained a lot of experience, but I also gained a lot of wisdom. And a person who have gained a lot of wisdom, they know it. And that life experience becomes far more satisfying. And we can say that in the end, yeah, it's worth it. I experienced this, and I did as best as I could, and so on. So that's what we want for this kind of
and I like how you say this the life experience. And what I want to stress on this is the consciousness about what we experience, to become clarity what we are experiencing. Because when we are small children, we have no idea. We just go through all these experiences like lost. And the more we grow up and we have the possibility to really witness what is going on with us and understand it to a large degree. And I think this is what we both are aiming to help people to understand what is going on with them and to be able to direct their lives into a certain direction they want to take. So yes, Margherita, I think we will have something to talk next week. Yes. And thank you for initiating this topic, which is so big and so vast, but at the same time so interesting, isn't it?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, and we're looking forward to talk and see you on the call next week at 9 o'clock. We do it Thursdays at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And
3 o'clock European time, Middle European time. Okay, bye-bye, and thank you.